the philosophical ideas. I create my choices via reason. My will operates independently of the physical causes in my brain and so forth. Now, first of all, there is, I think, the presumption that the important factors that go into decision making are all in the conscious domain. And of course, as most of us know very well, that isn't true. That many factors that are critically important for a decision are in the non-conscious domain. So let's just talk about a few of those. The best known is the work that was done by Benjamin Libet. And just in case not everybody knows about that work, I'll tell you very briefly. He puts electrodes on the scalp and takes EEG recordings. I am a subject, and all I have to do is when I feel the urge to press a button, I'm going to do it. Right? So I just kind of sit there. All right. Just when I feel the urge, what I'm going to do is notice on the clock, it's got a big sweep hand, where the sweep hand is. And at the end of the experiment, I say, it was at 10 or wherever it happens to be. Okay. So I just do this. I feel pretty much in control. Things are going along very nicely. He analyzes the data at the end, averaging over many trials. And what he finds is that on average, about 300 milliseconds before I signal that I have the urge, or before I record my urge, and about 500 milliseconds before I move, the readiness potential begins to show itself, which is a sort of, nobody exactly knows what it is, quite frankly, but it's robustly there before you make a movement, and some people call it movement preparation, but in any case, there is activity in the frontal structures that begins long before. 300 milliseconds in brain time is long before the intention forms and long before the action. And many people have tried to refute this, but the data are very, very robust. You can do a slight variation of it. Patrick Haggard has done this, where in addition to recording from getting the effect here, he looks at lateralized potentials, and they are also antecedent to the intention. And this is kind of suggested to some people that, well, maybe the intention is not the thing that constitutes, it all coming together, I'm going to do it. Maybe it is really just your awareness that the decision has been made non-consciously. So decision making may be quite a different thing. We also know, of course, by the work done by psychologists on subliminal perception, that you can affect people's choices and decisions by presenting subliminal stimuli. One that's very well known is that a person who has a tendency to want comfort food, if you give them a subliminal, like flash for a millisecond or 2 milliseconds, picture of something very nasty, they're likely to go get some comfort food. If you make it above threshold, so they actually see it, they don't. But there are many, many experiments. Tony Marcel has done experiments, and who's the guy? Zients. Paul Zients has done other experiments showing the effect on conscious behavior of subliminal perception. The work by social psychologists, I think, is important here too. Everybody probably has their favorite social psychology experiment, but the kind of classic one is where you have 10 identical pairs of pantyhose. They're put on a table in a supermarket, and women who are shopping are asked to, come and have a look and choose a pair of pantyhose, and then explain their choices. And they tend to pick pantyhose on the rightmost position, or at least there is a big position effect. And of course, when they explain their behavior, no one ever says, right, well, there's a position effect, and I'm sort of, I'm a normal human, so what do you expect? They always say, well, it's a better color for me, or it's more sheer, or these have a better denier than the others, or whatever it happens to be. So there's a real worry there. It'll come back. I find speech amazing, because speech is greatly impaired if you try to make conscious intentions and decisions about what you're going to say next. Unless, of course, you're in a remarkable situation. For example, you've just gone through a stop sign and you know what you're going to say to the cop, and so you're rehearsing and rehearsing, and then it doesn't usually come out right anyway. But there you are, right? I'm talking, and I can't possibly, there isn't time for me to have conscious decisions. It just comes out. But it's voluntary in the sense that if I said something really dreadful, you would certainly hold me responsible for it. So one of the most common things that we do is not preceded by anything like decisions and choices. Another very common thing that we do all the time, unwittingly, non-consciously, very intelligently, is make eye movements. And you've all seen those wonderful Yarbush diagrams that show, as a function of task, you will make a pretty regular and very intelligent scanning of the relevant scene. I never, or almost never, unless I'm in the optometrist's office, make a decision about where to look. Right? It just, it doesn't. And then there's the question of whether, within the folk psychological framework, those links between I considering, I choosing, I intending, why do we think those are causal? I mean, does it ever happen to you, for example, and this goes also to the question of are the connections tight? Do you ever, here's what happens to me all the time, right? I'm lying in bed, and I make a decision to get up. I don't get up. I just don't. It doesn't particularly bother me, but phenomenologically, I'm aware of this. And then I start thinking about other things, and I think about making coffee, and then I find I'm up. It's not like there had to be this thing, this phenomenologically identifiable event. And even when there was that thing, it wasn't always followed by the action. And that makes me very suspicious that there may not be anything like those particular events. And even if they are there, they may not be related in those kinds of ways. So do we confabulate? Well, I've already given you an example of confabulating why you did something. But confabulation, of course, is very common. But I want to give you a wonderful example of confabulation where you provide an explanation, but we know the explanation can't be right in the context of choice. And this is work done by Lars Hall. So here's the way the experiment works. You're a young red-blooded male, and I'm going to present to you pairs of pictures of females. And then your job is simply to pick out the one that you find most attractive. Okay. So you find that quite an easy task, and you do it. And once you've made your choice, I put my hands over the pictures. And sometimes, because I'm a real Houdini, I manage to shift them, right? And then I show you what you chose, and I say, now, can you explain to me why you chose this person? It doesn't matter, and people do not notice that the shift changes, right? So you have this nice black-haired lady and this nice blonde lady. The guy chooses the black-haired lady. I mix them up, and then I present to him, I say, okay, here's what you chose. Why did you choose that, right? The blonde lady. And he says, well, because I'm sort of partial to blondes. Right? And it doesn't really matter which, what I had. You make up a plausible explanation. Now, it's not because you're mendacious or whatever. That's just the way we do things. So that this has prompted some people to wonder whether, within the folk psychological domain, what we're calling intentions are really kind of ill-formed awarenesses of the unconscious decision. But given our culture, when we are